Zoning laws are one of those things almost nobody thinks about until they try to build something, park something, or live somewhere differently than average. Then suddenly zoning shows up like a brick wall with paperwork. If you're ever looked into building a tiny house, going off grid, putting a second home on land, or even just adding a small structure, you probably have run into confusing language, government websites that look like they were built in 1998, and rules that seems to contradict each other. So in this video, I'm going to explain zoning laws in plain English. No legal jargon, no planner speak, just what they are, why they exist, and how they affect you, and how to actually work with them instead of getting blindsided by them. At the most basic level, zoning laws are simply rules that tell you what can be built, where, and how land can be used. That's it. Think of it as a giant map divided into categories. Easy category or zone has a rule book attached to it. Okay. One zone might allow houses only, another might allow businesses, another might allow farms, another might allow a mix. Zoning is how local governments organize land. So a factory doesn't open next to a kindergarten, and a nightclub doesn't share a wall with a hospital. It's land organization through regulation. Where people get confused is assuming zoning is national or statewide. It is not. Zoning is usually controlled at the city or county level, which that means rules change and sometimes drastically. Just a few miles down the road, one county might welcome tiny houses. The next county might effectively ban them. Same state, same climate, completely different rules. And that's why copying someone else's setup without checking your local zoning is one of the fastest way to make an expensive mistake. When you look at a zoning map, you'll see codes, things like R1, R2, AG, C1, RR, or MX. And they look cryptic at first, but they're just shorthand, okay? R usually means residential, C means commercial, AG usually means agricultural. The number or suffix tells you density and allowed uses. A lower density residential zones usually allow fewer homes per acre and stricter structure rules. Higher density zones allow more units in smaller lots. Agricultural zones often allow more flexibility, but not always, and that surprises people. Farming zoning doesn't automatically mean you can live however you want. It means the land is prioritized for agricultural and residential use may still be regulated. So now let's talk about what zoning actually controls in your day-to-day reality. First is land, land use. That means what activities are allowed there: living, selling, farming, manufacturing, storing equipment, or running a business, and so on. Second is structure type. That means what kind of buildings are allowed: single family homes, duplexes, apartments, mobile homes, RVs, accessory dwellings, or sheds or workshops. Third is structure size and placement. That includes minimum home size, maximum height, and how far buildings must sit from the property lines. So it's what's called setbacks. Fourth is density. How many dwellings per lot or per acre? Those four control points affect almost every tiny house and off-grid plan. Minimum dwelling size is one of the biggest zoning tripwires for small home builders. Many residential zones have square foot minimums, sometimes 800, sometimes 1,000, sometimes more. And that means a 240 square foot tiny house on a foundation might not qualify as a legal primary dwelling there. And that's not about safety, it's about housing standards. Written decades ago when small homes weren't popular. And some areas are updating these rules, some are not. And that's why you must check, not assume. Then there's the difference between a tiny house on wheels and a tiny house on a foundation. Zoning often treats them completely different. A house on a foundation is usually reviewed under building codes. A house on wheels is often classified like an RV. RV rules are usually stricter for full time living. Many zones allow RVs temporarily, but not as permanent residents. And so two structures that look nearly identical can be treated totally different under zoning because one has wheels. Another major zoning concept is the accessory dwelling unit, often called ADU. That's a small secondary home on a property that already has a main house. Backyard cottages, garage apartments, and sometimes tiny houses fall into this category. Many cities now allow ADUs, but with rules about size, parking, and odor occupancy and utility connections for many tiny house owners, ADU rules are the legal pathway that makes placement possible, but only if the property qualifies. Setbacks are another rule that surprises people. A setback is the required distance between your structure and the property line. For example, you might have to place a home 25 feet from the front boundary and 10 feet from the sides. On small lots, setbacks can make buildable space much smaller than the lot itself. That's why a cheap, narrow parcel, sometimes can legally hold a home. There's no complaint build area left after setbacks are applied. Height limits are also, come into play more often than people expect. Some zones cap building height, especially near airports, scenic corridors, or view protected areas. If your tiny house has a tall loft or a roof line, height rules can matter. And let's talk about zoning versus building codes because people mix these up constantly. Zoning controls what you can build and where. Building codes control how you build it safely. Zoning says whether a tiny house is allowed. Building code says how the wiring, plumbing, and structure and insulation must be done. You usually must safely satisfy both. Zoning first, building code second. There are also overlays and special district extra rule layers placed on top of the zoning. Flood zones, coastal zones, wildfire zones, historic districts. All of these can add additional restrictions. You might meet zoning rules, but still face extra requirements because of overlays. That's another reason one phone call to the planning office is worth hours of guessing online. And here's simplify how to check zoning the practical way. First, find the parcel number or address of the land. Second, go to the county or the county gifts map. That's the interactive zoning map. Third, click the parcel and note the zone code. Fourth, look up the zone rules document, usually called a zoning ordinance. Read allowed uses and structure rules. And this is key. Call the planning department and confirm your interpretation. Never rely on guesswork alone. A lot of people are afraid to call planning offices, but you shouldn't be. Most planners would rather answer questions early than deal with violations later. You're not asking permission, you're asking for clarity. Keep questions simple and specific. Is a tiny house on wheels allowed as a primary residence in this zone? Clear question, clear answer. What if zoning doesn't allow what you want? You still have options. One is a variance, permission to break a specific rule due to unique circumstances. Variances are not guaranteed, but they exist. Another is a conditional use permit, approval for use that isn't normally allowed, but may be acceptable under conditions. Another is rezoning. Changing the classifications of the land. It's harder, but possible in some cases. And sometimes the simplest option is just choosing a different parcel in a friendlier zone. Rule in unincorporated areas often have the most flexible zoning, but don't assume they have none. Okay. No zoning areas still usually have health, septic, and safety rules. No zoning does not mean no regulation, it just means fewer land use categories. One costly mistake people make is buying land before confirming zoning allows their plan. They assume they can figure it out later. Sometimes they can't. And always verify first. Land that can be used as intended is not cheap, no matter the price. And another common misunderstanding is thinking temporary equals allowed. Parking a tiny house or an RV just for a while often still violates zoning if used for living. Enforcement varies, but the rule usually exists whether enforced or not. Zoning is not designed to stop you personally, it's designed to standardize land use access communities. across the communities, actually. That's what I meant to say, not access communities. You may not agree with every rule, but understanding them gives you power to navigate them. And here's a simple working strategy: research zones first, second, confirm allowed uses, confirm dwelling types, confirm size minimums, confirm the utility requirements, confirm your setbacks, then proceed. Once you understand zoning basics, the mystery disappears. It becomes a checklist instead of a barrier. And when you approach it informed instead of surprised, your tiny house, off grid, or small home project moves forward much faster and much cheaper. Zoning isn't exciting, okay? But understanding it is one of the highest leverage skills in alternative housing. It's the difference between a stalled dream and a finished home. And now you understand it simply. Thanks for watching. Check out this video up on the right for more tips on tiny house living, and we will check you on the next one. Thanks for watching.